Welcome everybody. This is a double event. We're doing an event that is both part of the Chinese Visual Festival, which many of you are aware of and have been coming to various screenings and other events over the last week, or I hope also going to the exhibition down in the King's Cultural Institute in the East Wing of Somerset House. But this is also an event that's folded into an AHRC-funded research network, which we have here at King's, which is on Chinese Film Festival studies. In other words, it's a network for people doing research into Chinese language film festivals outside China or film festivals in the Chinese language world. And one of the phenomena that has caught our interest is the existence of events like the Chinese Visual Festival. In other words, Chinese film festivals outside China. I do not recall when these kinds of regular events first started, but certainly it isn't that long ago. 10, 15 years ago, I do not think there were locally organized Chinese film festivals in London. But when we were starting to look into this in the UK and in London, we could think of at least 5 or 6 in London alone. And I'm pleased to say that today what we're going to do is have a chance to explore 3 of those. And so we have representatives and organizers from 3 events with us today. And the way we're going to run the event, I will introduce them in a minute, is that Luke Robinson and I, who are co-chairing the little research network, will start us off by sort of spending just 10 minutes asking a few quick questions. Our dream is 10 questions in 10 minutes, but maybe it'll be a few less than 10, but we'll do 10 minutes each just to kind of lay down some basic information and then hopefully open it for about half an hour of discussion with all of us here in the room. And our guests today are, in the front row here, Steven Flynn, who's from the Taiwan Cinefest, which, as the title implies, specializes in showing Taiwan films in the UK, and I think more recently in the US and in France as well. Is it?
France, yeah.
Yes, in France. So, and we also have Sun Xiaoxiao from Filming East Festival, which, amongst other things, was notable for introducing the awards for 1-minute films, if I remember correctly. Yes, which was really an interesting way of generating a series of sort of mini films from students based in outside China, as I recall. And then we have the organizers of the Chinese Visual Festival, Xie Jingjing and Zhang Xuhua, Sylvia Zhang. And so we'll sort of go in that order. And I suppose what we're trying to explore are some questions about, well, why people are having these festivals, what opportunities they see, what kinds of problems, etc., etc. So now I'm going to hand over to Luke, who's going to interview Steven quickly for you. So.
Okay. I think maybe just to kick it off, what would you say were the most important characteristics of your particular festival?
It's a good question. The Taiwan Cinefest, as Chris mentioned, is all focused on Taiwan. So I guess the most dominating characteristic is we're not Pan-Asia. We don't try to embrace the Greater China cinemas. We actually focus on the cinema of Taiwan. And for those people that perhaps want that more tightly defined, we didn't tightly define it. We looked at films that originated from Taiwan, films that were either financed outside of Taiwan, but they might have had Greater China, they might have mainland Chinese actors or a director, but the lead actor perhaps was Taiwanese. So I think that's probably number one, the most overt characteristic. I'd probably say number 2 is we're very independent. So a theme perhaps coming through from Taiwan. We aren't financed or backed by any official government funded institution here in the UK or in Taiwan. We are privately funded. We do have sponsors. We do have advertisers. We have supporters, collaborators, but we are largely bankrolled by my company to ensure that we have a certain degree of flexibility and control over what we do. Number 3, the characteristic is probably there isn't terribly many, I don't know if I'm being inappropriate by mentioning this, but there isn't terribly many non-Asian festival directors kicking around. I'm probably the only one on this panel. But I get commonly asked about, oh, you're British, I am actually British despite sounding American. Why are you doing this? What's your agenda? You don't have a family connection to it, and obviously I'm not Asian. So
I suppose that, in a sense, segues neatly to what was going to be my second question, which was what was the main aim of the festival, in a sense. So when you set it up, what were you thinking about, and why did you set it up?
The Taiwan Cinefest came out of my own personal, I think everyone's journey with cinema is very personal, it's a very subjective medium. My journey started when I was working in China, so I was in mainland China. I never really spent much time in Taiwan, but I was a big fan of Taiwanese cinema, and when I say that, I mean Ang Lee. Just to be super clear on it, Ang Lee is a Taiwanese-born director, very successful in Hollywood, but has also pioneered a lot of cross-cultural themes in his work. But he was a big influence, and obviously that sort of brought me into Taiwan. But I was also consuming a lot of different Chinese films from Hong Kong and also from the more classic sort of Chinese inspired themes. So I guess that when I was thinking one day on the treadmill, wouldn't it be great to do a film festival? What's out there? And it was a partly conscious decision to look at what was out there in terms of a spot, a vacancy, to say, where would we slot in? Should we do Pan-Asia? Should we do just mainland? Should we do just Taiwan? And at that point, I felt Taiwan was the most intuitive, that we could stake out an identity and kind of be unique that way.
Going back to the question of funding, I mean, you say that you're basically run as a private company. Could you perhaps break that down a bit? Kind of, how do you actually fund the festival?
I am probably one of the biggest funders of Taiwanese cinema in the UK. And I haven't had a holiday for that long, for about 4 years. The way that we operate the festival is very much a cultural operation. So we don't start at this, the beginning of the year and say, okay, right, let's. How does Steven drive his Ferrari at the end of this festival? It is a very benevolent or a sort of. We are trying to do a public good with it. I haven't really tried to monetize it in a commercial sense as much as I would have liked to. But the primary objective was always to serve as the public need of bringing and connecting Taiwanese cinema to a UK audience base, and primarily London, because that's where we're predominantly based. Did I answer the question? Can't remember. I started making speeches.
Yeah, reasonably, I think.
Okay.
Okay, given that you're working within, you're obviously showing Taiwanese cinema and trying to bring it to a kind of London-based audience, what decisions do you make in terms of what you show and what you don't show, and how do you source those films? And in fact, is there a relationship between the two, I suppose?
Okay, so the question's about curating the films.
Yeah.
We have a very collaborative way of doing it at our festival. Some festivals will be completely different to ours. We'll do a long list. We'll look at, number one, it's probably important to say that Taiwan produces 30 to 40 feature films per year, if that. And of those percent, that number, there's probably half which can go international, that have an appeal beyond an immediate sort of Taiwan market. So we'll probably look at the top 15, 20 films that year or in the preceding year, and then just sort of basically discuss it. We have a small team, so we can discuss it amongst ourselves to see what we feel is the right fit for us. And it hasn't. I'm going to shock the academics in the audience, but I mean, I have made decisions based on posters. And that might explain why the Spin Kid was our opening night last year. But I mean, it's an amazing, striking picture of Lan Jinlong, in his tribal, or not tribal, but temple style makeup. So I have a commercial bent, because what I do when I don't do the festival is I produce and I distribute. So I come at the festival with a very commercial bias, because that's my background, that's my heritage. But that said, the way that we execute is very much in the sort of public good. Yeah.
How do you source the films that you're showing?
So sourcing the films, it isn't a dark art. You have various film markets throughout the year that go on, where producers and buyers will meet and sales agents will exchange, what films they're working on, what's coming down the pipeline. And, you make connections in that environment. I mean, both, I think, Xiao Xiao and I were down at Cannes, not together, but we were there. There's a massive contingent of overseas sellers that are coming into Europe to meet with buyers. So we get a first look at what's coming along. The internet, you just Google. I mean, the very first year, you just Google around, you'd ask people. And it's amazing, the number of people that we took in as organizing volunteers. Their best friend's sister's cousin's brother was like the friend of the director. And you would just ask them to take that, along the path and try and get a word in to see if they'd be willing. Most of the case, they were very happy to be screened in London. Yeah.
So it's an interesting combination of actually the formal circuit as we know it and the kind of informal connections.
Yeah, informal connections have been massive. I mean, they've been ways that we've. You can never really go around the sales agent. If the sales agent, is big enough and heavy enough, or based in Hong Kong, you sometimes find it's quite hard to get a discount on pricing. But we've found that you can leverage favors in Guangxi a little bit to try and get something. Yeah.
Okay, going back to there's an interesting tension coming out, I think, between the commercial element here and this kind of the idea that it's for the public good. So, just who do you think your target audience is?
Everyone, because not right now. No one has seen Taiwanese film, and so I kind of that's an exaggeration. Whatever you do, whether it's Chinese or Taiwanese or Thai or Japanese, it's still niche. In the broader cinema landscape, foreign language film is 10%, 5% of box office in the UK. So, if I could produce Iron Man 4, I might do less with Taiwan. But that said, Iron Man 3 was produced partly in China. So, the dominance of China certainly comes through even in my non-festival work. But I think in terms of, our core target market is, if you're very specific about it, you group it into people like me, which are people that have a natural interest in Chinese culture, or broader Asia culture, broader Asian film, world cinema groupies. And we tend never to touch the mainstream audience, because one, it's very expensive to reach, and two, they probably don't care. And there's not enough advertising and content and persuasiveness that I can spend to persuade you to go and see a film that has words at the bottom of the picture. For some people, that's a really tough concept. So yeah, we try and focus on, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but you focus on intuitive market segments first, and then you try and build it up. And the way that you position your films also has a bearing on if you can break out of that niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, has this festival changed then over time, do you think? And I suppose also, how long has it been going on?
We started preparing 2008 for 2009, which was our foundation year. So we've been going 4 years. We normally occupy the May slot in the calendar, and this is the first year that I've had to move our May slot to potentially backhand, just because of my own film commitments. But that tends to be when we run. We've had a lot of ambition to grow it and expand the platform, and that's why last year we went to Paris, and it's why we've had ongoing conversations with Los Angeles and New York to try and make that work for the project. Yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely expanding kind of geographically.
Yeah. My pocket money's definitely gone down. So I mean, Paris was a massive success, and for me, after Paris, I was kind of like, why do we need to do London? Parisians, I don't know whether it was just because they were hungry for it or not, but we had a massive, very supportive crowd audience over there, and I started to make bland generalizations that all French people love Taiwanese cinema, and therefore we should open in more cinemas. But I think there's definitely an appreciation there, an intuitive appreciation of Taiwanese cinema. Or we could have just done marketing better there, I don't know, but we had a better result. And I suspect it's something to do with a French mentality that appreciates international cinema a little bit more than the average Londoner.
Well, certainly more explicit kind of awareness of or connection with that particular kind of world cinema, perhaps.
Yeah.
Have you faced any particular difficulties in kind of setting up?
Difficulties? Budget? You always want to do more. You want to have posters in the tube. You want to have a color page ad in the metro. You want to have a nicer cinema, but you do face, the reality as an independent. We don't have a pot of cash that's allocated to us every single year, and that is hard sometimes for planning. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is not really knowing if you can afford what you want to do next year, because you don't really know what's happening next year, and sometimes the budget isn't set. So that's a massive challenge. Also, we're not a permanent organization in the sense that we have a full staff that runs with us 12 months of the year, and that means that we onboard new people at the start of our festival year, and that means you have to train them up, and you have to kind of go through all the things that you didn't like last year, and try to land that learning this year. So that's a drain on time, but it's a necessary, for us. So yeah, that's also a bit of a challenge for us.
I mean, just in terms of recruitment, I'm kind of intrigued. How do you recruit?
Facebook. Facebook, and I think for 2 years, Goldsmith students were practically dominated our organizing team. So I have a big debt to Goldsmith. I seem to be in New Cross Gate so many times. But yeah, Goldsmith, they were great at the beginning, and over time, as word got out, we got applications from people that we were in Hello UK. I think that's a Taiwanese website you might be familiar with, and we always got 100, 200 applicants for effectively 10 roles every single year. So it was a very robust response. And when I was in Cannes a couple of weeks back, 2 of our volunteers from last year have now joined sales agents in Taiwan, and I was starting to feel that I'm training the next generation of sales agent, because they all graduate from our festival and then go and work in the business back in Taiwan. So, they're having fun, which is good, and I'm glad I could give something back to them. So,
what do you think the festival's kind of greatest success so far has been?
I would say that the greatest success is the ability to dial up the volume on Taiwanese cinema. You can't take it for granted that cinema will find an audience in the UK. You have to make that happen. So whether you don't want it just to be 2 people in a room, but if it can be 2 people, that's great. If it can be 1,000 people, even better. And last year I think we certainly reached into the 1,000 bracket of getting audience numbers when you combine London and Paris. And that's 1,000 people that we're seeing Taiwanese cinema that weren't seeing Taiwanese cinema before. So that's a success. But there's also, as I said, I was tongue-in-cheek about my training of sales agents for the future of Taiwan. But people get genuine life, practical skills and experience working with us. So hopefully the 6 or 7 months that you spend with us, you get something in return in terms of training. And it's a very practical activity running a festival. it isn't glamorous. I'm sure some people who organize festivals will probably agree with that.
I think one final question. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Okay, cool.
So we'll come back to Steve later.